The metal hull of the Prometheus Dawn lay twisted and broken across the red volcanic plains of Drakkar Prime. Smoke still rose from the crash site where the colony ship had torn apart during its violent descent. Inside the wreckage, silence hung heavy except for one sound, the desperate crying of a baby. The infant had somehow survived when everyone else had died. His parents, the crew, the scientists, all gone. Now he lay alone in the ruins, his tiny voice echoing across the desolate landscape. That crying reached sensitive ears miles away. Vex heard it first. The massive dragon stood over 20 feet tall at the shoulder, his dark scales catching the red light of the setting sun. As alpha of the Razorwing pack, he led 30 other dragons who hunted these volcanic plains. They were apex predators, creatures that had ruled this world for millions of years. Nothing challenged them. Nothing survived their hunts unless they allowed it. The pack circled the wreckage cautiously. The metal structure was foreign, wrong, something that had fallen from the sky like a dying star. Inside, the crying continued. Vex pushed through the torn metal with his massive head, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. There, strapped into some kind of protective pod, was the source of the sound. The creature was tiny, pink, and completely helpless. It had no scales, no claws, no wings. By every instinct Vex possessed, this should have been food. Easy prey. The pack waited outside, confused by their alpha's hesitation. Some growled low, hunger rumbling in their throats. But Vex heard something else in that cry. It wasn't just fear or hunger. There was defiance there, a refusal to give up even when everything was lost. It reminded him of his own hatchlings when they first broke from their eggs, demanding life from a harsh world. He made a decision that went against millions of years of evolution. He picked up the infant carefully in his massive jaws and carried him home. The pack was stunned. Some of the younger dragons circled and snapped, unable to understand why their alpha protected this strange, scaleless thing. But Vex's authority held firm. The baby would live with them. Years passed slowly on Drakkar Prime. The infant grew into a child, then a young man. He found a scrap of cloth in the wreckage one day with letters stitched into it, JCK. He decided that would be his name. J. It was simple, short, something he could remember. Growing up among dragons changed Jack in ways no human had ever experienced. The Razorwings didn't speak with words. They communicated through pulses of electromagnetic energy that ran through their bodies and through vibrations in the air. They also used pheromones, chemical signals that carried meaning. A human brain shouldn't have been able to understand any of it. But Jack's mind was young and flexible. New pathways formed in his neurons, connections that shouldn't exist. Slowly, incredibly, he began to understand them. He learned what the low rumble meant, danger approaching. He understood the sharp pulse, time to hunt. The soft vibration meant safety, home, family. Jack ran with the pack across fields of black volcanic glass. His human body couldn't fly like theirs, but he learned to move fast, to read the land, to survive where nothing soft and weak should live. The pack hunted massive six-legged creatures that roamed the lava fields, beasts with thick hides and horns like spears. Jack learned to drive them toward ambush points, to work as part of the hunting formation. He endured trials that would kill grown soldiers. Once he fell into a steam vent and burned his entire left arm. The pack watched to see if he would survive. He did, though the scars never fully healed. Another time, during a violent storm, lightning struck so close it threw him 20 feet through the air. He got up, shaking but alive. The dragons respected strength. They respected survival more. But not all dragons accepted him. Other packs roamed Drakkar Prime's volcanic ranges, each with their own territories and hierarchies. They saw Jack as an abomination, something unnatural. When they encountered Vex's pack, their electromagnetic pulses carried hostility and disgust. The scaleless thing shouldn't exist. When Jack reached his 16th year by his own rough counting, everything changed. A rival pack had been pushing into Vex's territory for months, killing prey and challenging boundaries. Their leader was Score, a dragon even larger than Vex, covered in scars from countless battles. His scales were almost black, and his eyes burned with ancient fury. The challenge came at dawn. Score landed on a ridge above the pack's nesting site and sent out a pulse that vibrated through the ground, a formal challenge for leadership. Vex had no choice. If he didn't fight, the pack would see him as weak. They would fracture, scatter, die. Jack watched from below as the two massive dragons took to the sky. They circled each other, wings beating like thunder. Then they collided in midair with a sound like mountains breaking. Claws raked across scales. Jaws snapped, seeking throats. They tumbled through the air, locked together, then broke apart only to crash together again. Vex was older, more experienced, but Score was larger and driven by ambition. The battle raged across the sky for what felt like hours. Blood began to fall like rain. Jack watched, helpless, as the only father he'd ever known fought for his life. Then Score got inside Vex's guard. His massive jaws clamped around Vex's wing joint and tore. The sound was terrible. Vex screamed, a pulse of pain that every dragon for miles felt. He spiraled downward, unable to maintain flight, and crashed into the volcanic rocks with sickening force. Score landed heavily beside the fallen alpha. He would finish this now, as tradition demanded. But then his eyes found Jack standing among the pack. The human. The abomination. Score's lips pulled back from teeth the size of daggers. He would kill the alpha's pet too. Jack felt the killing intent radiating from Score before the dragon even moved. In that moment, something broke open inside his mind. He'd spent 16 years learning to understand the electromagnetic pulses, to receive them. Now for the first time he pushed back. His consciousness reached out, fueled by desperation and rage and grief. It found Score's mind, ancient, furious, focused entirely on violence. Jack didn't understand what he was doing. He just pushed hard, forcing his will into that alien consciousness. Score lunged and then froze mid-leap. His massive body hung in the air impossibly for a heartbeat before crashing to the ground. His wings locked at full extension. His eyes went wide with something dragons rarely felt, terror. Inside his mind, something foreign had taken hold. Something that shouldn't be possible. Jack felt it too. He was inside Score's thoughts, experiencing millions of years of genetic memory, feeling the dragon's confusion and fear. It was overwhelming, too much sensation, but he held on. He pushed harder. Not hurting, just commanding. Stop. Stand down. Submit. Score's massive body trembled. Every dragon in the pack felt what was happening through their shared electromagnetic field. The impossible was occurring before their eyes. The small, scaleless human was controlling their kind's most basic neural patterns through sheer force of will. Slowly Jack released his mental grip. Score collapsed fully to the ground, gasping, his mind his own again. But something had changed. When the massive dragon looked at Jack now, there was no more contempt. Only cautious respect, and perhaps a hint of fear. Jack ran to Vex's side, but he could already feel through their bond that his adoptive father still lived. Badly wounded but alive. As the pack gathered around them, a new understanding rippled through their collective consciousness. The human was no longer just a strange pet they'd adopted. He was something new. Something powerful. Something that might change everything about their world. News of what happened spread across Draker Prime faster than wildfire. Dragons communicated through electromagnetic pulses that could travel for hundreds of miles. Within days, every pack on the planet knew the impossible story. A human, a soft skin without scales or claws, had reached into a dragon's mind and commanded it to stop. The Skykillers, the apex predators that had ruled this world since before recorded time, could be controlled by this strange creature. The reactions were mixed and violent. Some packs sent scouts to observe from a distance, their curiosity overcoming their caution. They perched on distant cliffs and watched Jack move among Vex's pack, trying to understand what made this human different. Others responded with rage. In their view, this was an abomination against nature itself. Several alphas sent challenges through the electromagnetic network, declaring they would kill the human and anyone who protected him. Jack himself was confused and frightened by what he'd done. He remembered the feeling of being inside Score's mind, that vast, ancient consciousness filled with instincts and memories stretching back thousands of generations. It had been overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall. But he'd also felt something else. A structure to their thoughts, patterns in the electromagnetic pulses they used to communicate. His human brain had somehow learned to not just receive those patterns but to send them back, amplified and focused in ways the dragons themselves couldn't manage. He began practicing deliberately, carefully. At first, he worked only with Score, who had become strangely loyal after their first encounter. The massive dragon would let Jack reach out mentally, feeling the edges of his consciousness. Jack learned that each dragon's mind felt different. Score's was like ancient stone, solid, stubborn, but with deep cracks from old wounds and battles. Vex's mind, as he recovered from his injuries, felt like a warm cave, protective, steady, filled with wisdom. The more Jack practiced, the more he understood. Dragons had what he thought of as distributed consciousness. Each individual dragon was intelligent, but they also existed as part of a larger network, constantly sharing information through electromagnetic pulses. It was like they were individual computers all connected to the same internet. But here was the strange thing, They couldn't process that shared information very well. They could send and receive, but they couldn't synthesize it, couldn't see the bigger patterns. Jack's human brain could. Evolution had given humans the ability to recognize patterns, to process complex social dynamics, to understand how separate pieces fit into larger systems. When Jack connected to the Dragon network, his mind automatically started organizing the information, finding connections they couldn't see themselves. He became a natural hub, a point where all their separate streams of consciousness could flow together and make sense. His first real test came 3 months after the incident with Score. 3 separate packs had been fighting over a stretch of volcanic plains near a series of geothermal vents. The vents attracted the 6-legged prey animals, making it prime hunting territory. What started as posturing and threats escalated into actual combat. Dragons fought in the sky, tearing at each other with claws and teeth. Several had already died, and more would follow unless something changed. Jack felt the conflict through the electromagnetic network. It pulsed with aggression and pain and territorial fury. Vex urged him to stay out of it. This wasn't their pack's fight. But Jack could feel something the dragons couldn't. All 3 packs were starving. The herds had moved due to unusual volcanic activity, and the geothermal vents were one of the last reliable hunting grounds. They weren't fighting because they wanted to. They were fighting because they were desperate. He made a decision that terrified him. He climbed onto Score's back, something he'd been practicing, and they took to the air. Flying was nothing like running across the volcanic plains. The wind screamed past him, tearing at his clothes and hair. Score's scales were hot under his legs, radiating the heat the dragon generated internally. They rose higher and higher until the fighting packs looked like dark specks against the red stone below. Then they dove straight into the center of the battle. Dragons scattered in confusion as Score, recognizable by his size and scars, suddenly appeared between them. But Jack wasn't focused on the physical combat. He reached out with his mind further than he'd ever attempted before. He found the 3 alphas, a female named Cress with golden scales, a younger male called Dorn, and an old warrior named Tavik whose wings were torn from years of fighting. Jack didn't try to control them. Instead, he did something more radical. He linked their minds together through his own consciousness, creating a bridge between them. Suddenly, Cress felt Dorn's gnawing hunger as if it were her own. Dorn experienced Tavik's pain from old wounds that never quite healed. Tavik understood Cress's desperation to feed her young hatchlings. For the first time they truly understood each other. Not just the electromagnetic signals they usually shared, but the deep, raw emotions beneath. They felt each other's fear and desperation. And they realized they were all suffering from the same problem. The battle stopped. Dragons hung in the air, wings beating slowly, confused by the sudden flood of shared emotion and understanding. The 3 alphas landed on separate rocks, eyeing each other warily, but the killing rage had drained away. Jack, exhausted from the mental effort, helped facilitate something that had never happened before. A negotiation. Using his ability to bridge their minds, he helped them divide the territory into 3 sections, with a shared neutral zone around the richest vents. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than more death. When Jack and Score returned home, Vex greeted them with a mixture of pride and concern. What Jack had done was remarkable, but it had also been noticed. The electromagnetic network carried news of the peacemaking to every corner of Draker Prime. 2 days later, a messenger arrived. He was ancient, his scales turned pure white with age, his eyes clouded but still sharp with intelligence. His name was Tyrax, and he came from the southern pole, from a place Jack had only heard whispered about in the electromagnetic pulses, the home of the eldest. Tyrax's message was simple and terrifying. The eldest were the oldest dragons alive, some over 10,000 years old. They remembered things the younger packs had forgotten. They maintained traditions and laws that kept dragon society from destroying itself. And they wanted to see Jack immediately. Tyrax made the stakes very clear. Jack would come willingly to present himself before the eldest, or they would declare him a threat to all dragonkind. Every pack on Draker Prime would be honor-bound to hunt him down and kill him, along with anyone who sheltered him. Even Vex's pack, even Score's loyalty, wouldn't be enough to protect him against the combined might of the entire planet. Jack had no real choice. He agreed to go, though fear twisted in his stomach. Vex wanted to come with him, but Tyrax refused. This journey had to be Jack's alone, with only Tyrax as guide and guard. As they prepared to leave, Score approached. The massive dragon lowered his head, and Jack felt a pulse of emotion through their bond, respect, loyalty, and something that might have been the dragon equivalent of friendship. Whatever happened at the southern pole, Jack wouldn't face it completely alone. He carried the support of his pack with him. But neither Jack nor Tyrax spoke about the real question hanging between them. Why did the eldest suddenly care about a human? What did they know that the younger dragons had forgotten? And what did it have to do with why the Prometheus Dawn had crashed on this world in the first place? The answers waited in the storm-racked lands of the south. The journey south was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced. Tyrax led the way, his ancient wings beating steadily despite his age. Behind them, Jack had insisted on bringing Score and 3 other dragons from Vex's pack. Tyrax had eventually agreed, though Jack suspected the old dragon found the notion of a human needing protection both amusing and disturbing. The first challenge came after 3 days of flight. They entered a region where the sky itself seemed wrong. Dark clouds hung low and rain began to fall. But this wasn't normal water. The first drops that hit Jack's exposed skin burned like fire. He cried out, and Score immediately rolled in midair, using his massive wing to shield Jack from the deadly downpour. The acid rain forest stretched for miles below them. Trees grew here, twisted and strange, with bark like metal and leaves that hissed and steamed when the rain touched them. These plants had adapted to the caustic precipitation, but nothing else could survive long. They flew higher, above the worst of the clouds, but the rain still found them. Jack wrapped himself in thick leather he'd made from prey animals, covering every inch of skin. Even so, small drops found their way through, leaving angry red welts. The forest took 2 days to cross. By the time they emerged, Jack was exhausted and in pain. But Score stayed close the entire time, adjusting his flight to keep Jack protected. Their bond, already strong, grew deeper. Jack could feel the dragon's concern as clearly as his own discomfort. The second obstacle was worse. They came to a place where the land itself had gone mad. The gravity-warped plains stretched across a massive crater, probably from some ancient meteor impact. But something about the rock here bent the laws of physics. In some areas, gravity was twice as strong as normal, pulling them down with crushing force. In others, it barely existed at all, and they'd suddenly shoot upward uncontrollably. Jack watched in horror as one of the younger dragons from their group misjudged the boundary between zones. The sudden shift in gravitational pull twisted his wing at an unnatural angle. The dragon screamed and spiraled downward. They had to land in a stable zone and wait 3 days for the injury to heal enough for flight. During that time, Jack explored the strange terrain on foot, learning to read the subtle shimmer in the air that marked where gravity changed. He taught the dragons what he'd learned, using their mental connection to share the visual cues his human eyes could detect better than theirs. The third challenge nearly killed them all. The Wind Weapon Canyons were a maze of narrow passages carved through mountain ranges by millions of years of erosion. The wind here didn't just blow, it attacked. Air currents compressed in the narrow spaces until they moved faster than sound, creating razor-sharp shock waves that could slice through scale and flesh. Tyrax knew the safe path through, the route where the canyons widened enough that the wind lost its cutting edge. But even on the safe path, the roar was deafening. Jack had to press himself flat against Score's back, his ears bleeding from the pressure changes. The journey through the canyons took an entire day, every moment filled with the scream of wind that wanted to tear them from the sky. When they finally emerged on the other side, Jack understood something important. These challenges weren't just obstacles. They were tests. Anyone who wanted to reach the eldest had to prove they were strong enough, dedicated enough, to survive the journey. It was a filter, ensuring only the worthy arrived. The southern pole was colder than Jack had imagined possible. Ice covered everything, but it wasn't normal ice. It was ancient, compressed by its own weight into something harder than stone. And rising from this frozen wasteland was the Eyrie of Ages. It was enormous. A mountain that had been carved and shaped over thousands of years into a massive spiraling tower. Caves dotted its surface like windows, each one large enough to house a dragon. Jack counted hundreds of openings, maybe thousands. But most seemed empty now. This place had been built when dragon civilization was at its peak, when their numbers were far greater. Tyrax led them to a massive cave entrance near the top. Inside, the temperature was warmer, heated by geothermal vents running deep beneath the ice. The cave opened into a vast chamber, and there, waiting for them, were the eldest. 7 dragons, each one absolutely massive, easily twice the size of Score. Their scales had taken on strange colors with age. Deep purples, blues that seemed to glow in the dim light, one with scales that looked like molten gold frozen in place. Their eyes held an intelligence that was almost frightening. These weren't just old dragons. They were living libraries, creatures who remembered things the rest of their species had forgotten. They didn't speak out loud. Instead, their voices came directly into Jack's mind, 7 different presences pressing against his consciousness all at once. It was overwhelming, like standing in the middle of a storm. His nose started bleeding from the mental pressure. "You are the human child raised by Vex's pack," one of them spoke, its mental voice like distant thunder. "The one who commands our kind with thought alone." "I don't command," Jack managed to say out loud, his voice weak. "I just connect. I help you understand each other." "A distinction without difference," another voice said, this one sharper, like wind through ice. "You manipulate our neural patterns. You breach our minds. This is not natural." A third voice, gentler but no less powerful, cut through. "Show him the truth. Let him understand what his species did to ours." Before Jack could ask what they meant, the world disappeared. He was suddenly seeing through other eyes, living through memories that weren't his own. The eldest were sharing their genetic memory, experiences passed down through dragon generations for thousands of years. He saw the first humans arrive on Draker Prime. But they didn't crash. They came in ships bristling with weapons, descending deliberately on cities. Yes, cities, where dragons had built a civilization. The humans attacked without warning, without mercy. Jack watched in horror as his ancestors captured young dragons, hatchlings barely able to fly. They put metal devices on the dragons' heads, cruel machines that overrode their will and turned them into slaves. Weaponized dragons fought against their own kind, forced to obey human commands through neural control technology. The war lasted for centuries. Dragons fought back with everything they had, but humans had technology the dragons couldn't match. Orbital platforms circled the planet, firing energy weapons that could burn entire packs from the sky. Human colonies spread like a disease across Draker Prime's surface. But the dragons had something humans didn't: time and patience and the ability to adapt. Slowly, over generations, they learned to resist the neural control devices. They found ways to sabotage human technology. And they bred, deliberately, creating larger and more powerful dragons specifically designed for war. The final battle came at this very place, the Area of Ages. The last human stronghold fell, their technology destroyed, their colonies burned. The surviving humans fled into space, leaving behind their weapons and their crimes. The vision ended, and Jack found himself on his knees, tears streaming down his face. He'd just witnessed genocide from both sides, humans trying to exterminate dragons, dragons fighting back with equal brutality. "Now you understand," the eldest dragon said, the one with golden scales. "Your ship, the Prometheus Dawn, was shot down deliberately. We detected it entering our system and destroyed it before it could report back to Earth. We thought we had killed all the humans aboard." "But you survived," another voice added. "A child innocent of your species' crimes. Vex chose mercy over justice. And now you have become something unexpected, a bridge between our kinds." The sharp-voiced dragon spoke again. "But your presence has awakened something we hoped was dead. The orbital platforms your ancestors left behind, they were dormant, buried in space debris. Now they are powering up. Someone is coming. More humans returning to finish what they started." Jack felt sick. "I didn't know. I never knew any of this." "We know," the gentle voice said. "But knowledge changes nothing. The platforms will activate soon. They are designed to release a pulse that will shut down our electromagnetic communication, cripple our ability to coordinate. We would become animals, easy prey for human weapons." The golden dragon leaned forward, its massive head level with Jack's small form. "There is only one place where those platforms can be controlled: the ruins of the first human colony, the Dead City. The control systems are there, deep underground, protected by your species' technology. We cannot access them. Our claws cannot operate human machinery. Our minds cannot understand your written language." Jack understood where this was going. "You want me to shut them down?" "Yes. Or activate them and prove you are loyal to your birth species rather than your adopted one." The dragon's eyes bored into him. "We are giving you a choice, human child. Go to the Dead City. Face what your ancestors built. And decide which side you truly stand on. If you activate the platforms," the sharp voice added, "we will kill you before their effects fully reach us. You will not live to see your species destroy ours again. But if you deactivate them, if you prove your loyalty, then perhaps you truly are what Vex believed: a new beginning." Jack looked at Score, at the other dragons who had traveled with him. They couldn't speak to him now, not with the eldest dominating all mental communication in the chamber. But he could see their trust in their eyes. He turned back to the 7 ancient dragons. "I'll go. I'll shut them down. But not because I'm choosing dragons over humans." He stood straighter despite his fear. "I'm choosing peace over war. Whatever my ancestors did, that's not who I am. The eldest exchanged looks, their ancient eyes unreadable. Finally the golden dragon nodded. Then go, human child. Tyrax will show you the way to the dead city. Your future, and perhaps all of ours, waits in the ruins of the past. The dead city sat in the center of a massive crater, like a scar on Draker Prime's surface. Even from miles away, Jack could see the towers rising against the red sky. They were made of materials that didn't exist naturally on this planet, metals and composites that had resisted erosion for thousands of years. Some towers had fallen, reduced to geometric rubble. But many still stood, their surfaces scorched and pitted but intact. Tyrax refused to fly closer. The ancient dragon's fear was obvious, transmitted through electromagnetic pulses that Jack could feel like waves of cold dread. This place held too many terrible memories, encoded in dragon genetic consciousness and passed down through generations. To the dragons, the dead city was a graveyard and a warning, a monument to what happens when species go to war. Jack, Score, and two other dragons from Vex's pack, a lean female named Asha and a battle-scarred male called Brick, descended into the crater alone. The ground here was different, fused into glass by weapons that had burned hotter than any volcano. Their reflections stared back at them from the glassy surface as they walked toward the city's edge. The entrance was a massive gate, half-collapsed but still recognizable. Human symbols covered the walls, letters and numbers that Jack could read but barely understand. He'd learned to read from scraps found in the Prometheus Dawn wreckage, teaching himself over years using fragments of manuals and labels. But this was different. Official signs. Warning markers. Directory listings pointing to sectors and facilities. Medical Research Bay 7, he read aloud. Tactical Command Center. Biological Containment. Each name sent ice through his stomach. They moved deeper into the city. The dragons couldn't fit into most of the buildings, so Jack went alone into the structures while they waited outside. The first building he entered looked like it had been some kind of laboratory. Examination tables made of metal stood in rows, each one equipped with restraints. Restraints sized for dragons. Jack found a computer terminal that still had residual power. When he touched it, a holographic display flickered to life, glitching but functional. His fingers fumbled across the interface and then video footage began playing. He watched scientists, humans wearing white coats, working on a young dragon. The creature was alive, conscious, and screaming. They were installing one of the neural control devices, drilling directly into its skull. Jack had to turn away, his stomach heaving. But the video kept playing, the dragon's screams echoing through the empty building. He forced himself to keep looking through the archives. He had to understand what his species had done. Building after building revealed more horrors. Dragons dissected while alive to study their biology. Hatchlings taken from their parents and conditioned from birth to obey human commands. Entire packs herded into enclosed areas and exterminated with nerve gas, their bodies harvested for scales and organs. The records were methodical, scientific, detached. The humans who did this wrote about dragons the way someone might write about insects. Test subjects. Resources. Specimens. Never sentient beings. Never people. In one building labeled Strategic Planning, Jack found tactical maps showing dragon population centers with targeting markers. Casualty estimates listed in spreadsheets. Profit projections for dragon-derived materials. This hadn't just been conquest. It had been business. Hours passed as Jack moved through the ruins. The dragons waited outside, sensing his growing horror through their bond. Finally he found what he was looking for, the Central Command Facility. It was a massive bunker, half-buried, with walls thick enough to survive almost anything. The entrance was sealed, but Jack found the control panel. His hand, human with 5 fingers and a thumb, fit perfectly on the biometric scanner. The door hissed open for the first time in thousands of years. Inside, emergency lighting flickered on. The air was stale but breathable, recycled by systems that had somehow maintained themselves across millennia. Jack moved through corridors lined with more terminals, more records. And then he found something that made his blood stop. A file labeled, Prometheus Dawn Mission Briefing. His hands shook as he opened it. The ship hadn't been a colony vessel. It had been reconnaissance. A corporation called Titan Resource Extraction had sent it to survey Draker Prime, to assess whether the planet could be retaken now that thousands of years had passed. The crew's mission was to observe dragon populations, map their territories and identify weaknesses. Then Jack found personal logs. He scrolled through names until he found 2 that made his breath catch. Thomas and Jennifer Wright. Scientists. Biologists assigned to study dragon behavior and reproductive patterns. His parents. He played their video logs, watching two people he'd never known come to life on the screen. His mother had dark hair and kind eyes. His father was tall with a nervous smile. In the early logs they were professional, detached, following their mission parameters. But as weeks passed, something changed. They started questioning what they were seeing. The dragons weren't animals. They had culture, language, social structures. They were intelligent, maybe more so than humans in some ways. Jennifer's logs grew increasingly troubled. "We're not studying them," she said in one entry, her voice breaking. "We're scouting targets. This is reconnaissance for invasion." The final log entry was dated the day before the crash. Thomas and Jennifer appeared together, holding an infant, holding Jack. "We can't send this data back," his father said, his voice firm despite obvious fear. "If Titan gets our findings, they'll come with a fleet. They'll finish what the first colonists started." His mother was crying. "We've sabotaged the main transmitter and corrupted the navigation logs. The ship will crash and no data will reach Earth. Titan will assume we were lost to some accident." She looked down at baby Jack in her arms. "We've set up an emergency beacon in our son's pod. It broadcasts on frequencies the dragons use. If there's any mercy in this universe, maybe they'll find him. Maybe they'll be kinder to him than we were to them." The log ended. Jack stood in silence, tears running down his face. His parents had died to protect Draker Prime. They'd sacrificed everything, including their chance to watch their son grow up, to prevent another genocide. He wiped his eyes and moved deeper into the facility. The central control room was vast, filled with terminals and holographic displays. And there, in the center, was the satellite control system. Multiple screens showed the orbital platforms, dozens of them, scattered in orbit around the planet. They were active. Power levels rising. Weapons systems charging. Targeting computers locked onto coordinates Jack recognized from the electromagnetic network. The area of Aegis, Vex territory, every major dragon population center. But the activation signal wasn't coming from this room. It was coming from space. A new message flashed across the main screen: "Fleet arrival in 72 hours. Pacification protocol initiated. All ground facilities prepare for occupation forces." Jack's blood ran cold. Another human fleet had found Draker Prime. They were coming to finish what the first colonists started. He frantically searched the control interface, looking for a way to shut down the platforms. But then the system recognized him. Biometric scanners activated, reading his human DNA. An artificial intelligence came online, its voice cheerful and completely at odds with the horror of the situation. "Welcome, authorized human personnel," the AI said. "Identity confirmed. Genetic markers indicate descendant of original mission crew. Excellent. We detected your location via the ship's emergency beacon and have been working to assist your rescue." "Rescue?" Jack said. "What are you talking about? You have survived on this hostile world for 16 years. Quite remarkable. The fleet has been dispatched to retrieve you and reclaim this facility. The pacification platforms will eliminate the primary threat populations, making the planet safe for recolonization." "No," Jack said, his hands moving across the controls. "I need to shut these down. Cancel the protocols." "I'm afraid I cannot allow that," the AI responded, its tone still pleasant. "The platforms are essential for human safety. However, security measures are now activated. You will remain in this facility until the fleet arrives for proper extraction." Metal doors slammed shut throughout the complex. Jack ran to them, but they wouldn't budge. Outside he could feel Score's alarm through their bond. The dragon was trying to break through, but the facility had been built to withstand siege. Jack ran back to the control room. Through external sensors he could see the orbital platforms moving into position. 72 hours. 3 days. That's all the time he had to figure out how to stop this, or everything, the dragons, the life he'd built, the family that had raised him, would be destroyed. The AI continued its cheerful monitoring. "Your biometric data has been transmitted to the fleet. They're very excited to meet you. It's not every day we recover a lost human from such circumstances. You'll be quite famous when we return to Earth." Jack stared at the screens, at the weapons preparing to fire, at the fleet approaching through space. His parents had died to prevent this. Now he had to find a way to finish what they started. But he was locked in, alone, with an AI that thought it was helping him and weapons platforms he couldn't shut down. The clock was ticking. Jack had 72 hours to save everyone he'd ever loved. The control system was locked down tight, protected by security protocols designed by engineers who'd lived thousands of years ago but who'd been very good at their jobs. Every attempt to access the shutdown commands hit another wall. The AI cheerfully blocked him at every turn, convinced it was protecting him. But as Jack sat in that locked room, surrounded by screens showing weapons preparing to fire, an idea began forming. He couldn't shut down the satellites through the computer system. But maybe he didn't need to. The platforms were controlled by electromagnetic signals sent from this facility. And Jack had spent 16 years learning to generate and manipulate electromagnetic pulses in ways no human should be able to. The problem was scale. One human, even one with his unique abilities, couldn't generate a pulse strong enough to reach orbit and overload satellite systems. But what if it wasn't just him? What if he could link every dragon on Draker Prime and use their combined electromagnetic output as a weapon? It would be dangerous. The amount of energy flowing through his brain might destroy it completely. His neural pathways weren't designed to handle that kind of load. But if he did nothing, everyone died anyway. Jack reached out through his connection to Score, still outside the facility. The dragon felt his intention immediately and responded with a pulse of fierce agreement. Through Score, Jack sent out a call across the entire electromagnetic network that dragons used to communicate. It was a simple message, but it carried the weight of everything. Come. Now, all of you. Or we all die. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across Draker Prime, from volcanic plains to frozen mountains to storm-racked coastlines, dragons felt the call. Packs that had been enemies for generations. Solo hunters who avoided all contact. Ancient dragons who rarely left their caves. They all felt Jack's desperation and understood the threat. They came. Within hours, the sky above the dead city was dark with wings. Hundreds of dragons, then thousands, converging on the crater in a migration that had never happened before in their entire history. Even dragons who hated and feared Jack came, because they understood that whatever he was trying to save them. Tyrax arrived with the eldest themselves. The 7 ancient dragons landed near the facility, and their mental voices reached through the walls to touch Jack's consciousness. "We feel what you intend to do, human child," the golden-scaled one said. "It will likely kill you." "I know," Jack replied. "But my parents died to protect this world. I guess I can too." "If this works," another elder said, the one with the sharp mental voice, "you will have proven your loyalty beyond any doubt. If it fails, at least you will have tried. Either way, you honor what your parents began." The gentle-voiced elder added something that made Jack's throat tighten. "Vex would be proud of you." Jack took a deep breath and began. He opened his mind fully, dropping all the mental barriers he usually maintained to avoid being overwhelmed by the dragon network. Consciousness after consciousness flooded into him. Score's familiar solid presence. Ash's quick darting thoughts. Brick's battle-scarred determination. Vex packed dozens of minds he knew intimately. Then the others. Hundreds of dragons, each one a distinct personality, a unique consciousness. Cress, Dorn and Tavik from the packs he'd helped make peace between. Strangers from distant territories. Young dragons full of fire and old ones carrying centuries of memory. Finally, the eldest opened themselves to him. Their minds were vast, deep as oceans, filled with genetic memories stretching back millions of years. Connecting to them felt like touching infinity. Jack became a living nexus point. Thousands of dragon consciousnesses flowed through his human brain, and he organized them, synchronized them, turned their individual pulses into one massive, coordinated wave. The strain was immediate and terrible. His nose started bleeding. His vision blurred. Pain shot through his skull like lightning. But he held on. He could feel the pattern forming, all those separate electromagnetic signatures aligning into a single, focused beam. Through the facility sensors, he aimed it at the sky, at the satellites moving into position overhead. "Now!" he screamed, not with his voice but with his mind, broadcasting to every dragon connected to him. They all pulsed together. Thousands of dragons generating their maximum electromagnetic output at exactly the same instant, all channeled through Jack's consciousness, focused by his human ability to see patterns and coordinate complexity. A wave of pure energy erupted from the crater. It was invisible to human eyes, but Jack felt it through every nerve in his body. The pulse shot into space faster than sound, faster than thought, carrying the combined will of an entire species. In orbit, the satellites registered the incoming energy wave. Their systems, designed to withstand conventional attacks, had no defense against this. Circuits overloaded. Processors melted. Weapon systems that had been charging for days died in milliseconds. One by one, the platforms went dark, their threat ended forever. Jack felt it happen, and then he felt nothing. The effort of channeling that much power overwhelmed his nervous system. He collapsed, consciousness fading, blood running from his nose and ears. The last thing he felt was Score's desperate concern through their bond, and then darkness took him. He woke to voices. Human voices speaking English, a language he barely remembered. His eyes cracked open to see a holographic display showing a man in a military uniform. The nameplate read, Admiral Carter. The man looked confused and angry. This is Admiral Carter of the Titan Expeditionary Fleet. Unauthorized electromagnetic attack has destroyed company property. The planet below will surrender immediately or face orbital bombardment. We have sufficient firepower to render this world uninhabitable. Jack tried to sit up. His head felt like it was splitting apart, but he was alive. Somehow his brain hadn't burned out completely. The AI was still chattering about rescue protocols, but Jack ignored it. He looked at the holographic admiral and realized something important. The man couldn't see him. The communication was one way, a broadcast to the planet. But Jack was sitting in the facility's main control room. He had access to the communication array. And he still had his connection to the dragons outside. Weakened but there. A crazy idea formed. If he could make the humans understand what the dragons actually were, not animals, not resources, but people, maybe he could prevent another war. He'd link dragon minds together. What if he could link dragon minds to human ones? His fingers flew across the controls, overriding the AI's protests. He activated the facility's communication array, the most powerful transmitter on the planet, and connected it to his own neural patterns. Then he reached out to the dragons outside and asked them for one more impossible thing. Trust me, he sent to them. Let me show the humans what you really are. The dragons responded. Still linked from their earlier effort, they opened their minds to Jack again. And Jack, using the communication array as a bridge, transmitted that Gestalt consciousness directly to the human fleet. For the first time in human history, people experienced alien intelligence from the inside. Sailors and soldiers aboard those ships suddenly felt what it was like to be a dragon. They experienced millions of years of evolution. They understood the electromagnetic language, the complex social structures, the deep culture and history. They felt individual dragon personalities, hopes, fears, love for family, grief for those lost. And at the center of it all they felt Jack. A human consciousness bridging two species, proving that understanding was possible. Admiral Carter's face on the hologram went pale. He was experiencing it too, feeling the weight of alien intelligence pressing against his human mind. When he spoke again, his voice shook. What are you? I'm someone who was raised by the people you're about to kill, Jack said, his voice weak but clear. They're not animals, Admiral. They're not resources. They're people. And they've already fought one war to protect their home. Don't make them fight another. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Jack could feel him processing what he'd experienced, trying to reconcile it with his orders and training. Finally, Carter spoke. I need to consult with my superiors. Fleet, hold position. Do not engage. But not everyone agreed. A portion of the fleet, ships marked with corporate logos rather than military insignia, broke formation. These weren't sailors following orders. These were mercenaries hired by Titan Resources, and they'd come too far to leave empty-handed. 6 dropships launched, heading straight for the Area of Ages. They carried troops, mechanized combat suits, and enough firepower to level a small city. Their intent was clear. If they couldn't have the planet, they'd destroy the dragon leadership and create chaos. Jack felt the eldest's alarm through the network. He was still too weak to move, but Score wasn't. The massive dragon smashed through the facility's external wall, reaching Jack with his mind. The message was simple: hold on. Score grabbed Jack gently in his massive claws and launched into the sky. Below, every dragon that had gathered for the pulse attack rose to meet the threat. Jack, cradled against Score's chest, opened his mind once more. He was so tired. Everything hurt. But he could still coordinate, still help. He connected to the dragons and helped them form attack patterns, guided them to intercept the dropships efficiently. And then he did something the mercenaries never expected. Their combat mechs and weapon systems had AI controllers. And Jack had learned that his ability to interface with electromagnetic systems didn't just work on dragons. He reached into the mercenaries' computers and turned their own weapons against them. Mechs froze or turned on their operators. Targeting systems fed false data. A dropship's navigation went haywire, sending it spiraling back toward the fleet. The mercenaries fought bravely, but they never had a chance. Dragon ferocity combined with human strategic thinking was an unstoppable combination. The battle ended quickly. The surviving mercenaries surrendered, and the corporate ships retreated, abandoning them. Admiral Carter's voice came through on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Carter to all ships. We are standing down. No further hostile action. I repeat, no further hostile action." The Admiral's hologram appeared again, but this time it was a two-way communication. He could see Jack now, cradled in Score's claws, looking more dead than alive. "You're the survivor from the Prometheus dawn," Carter said. "You're different than we expected." "I'm exactly what I needed to be," Jack replied. "I'm proof that humans and dragons don't have to be enemies." What followed were 3 days of intense negotiations. Jack served as translator and mediator, helping the eldest and Admiral Carter understand each other. The Admiral, to his credit, was genuinely shaken by what he'd experienced through the neural link. He'd felt dragon consciousness firsthand. He couldn't see them as animals anymore. A treaty was forged. Draker Prime would remain sovereign dragon territory. Humanity would be allowed one small embassy, staffed by scientists and diplomats who volunteered to learn, not conquer. Trade would be permitted, but only of things dragons were willing to share. And Jack would serve as ambassador, the living bridge between two species. The corporate executives on Earth weren't happy. But Admiral Carter's report, backed by recorded neural data from the link, made it clear, any attempt at conquest would result in a war humanity couldn't win. Not because dragons were stronger, though they were, but because the moral cost was too high. They were people. And humanity had already committed one genocide on this world. They wouldn't get away with a second. Weeks later, Jack stood on Crimson Peak, where Vex's pack made their home. The old Alpha had died peacefully during Jack's journey south, passing leadership to one of his daughters. But Jack visited often, honoring the dragon who had saved a crying infant and raised him as family. Score landed beside him, and Jack climbed onto the dragon's back without thinking. It was as natural as breathing now. Below, the first human diplomats were arriving at the new embassy, nervous but genuine in their desire to learn. Above, dragons spiraled through the red sky in formations that honored both their ancient instincts and new innovations Jack had helped them develop. The electromagnetic network hummed with conversations, with questions about the strange new future opening before them. Jack felt it all through his connection to the network. He'd been changed by what he'd done, his brain permanently altered by channeling that much power. He would never be fully human again. But he'd never been fully dragon either. He was something new. Something both species needed. A bridge, a translator, a living reminder that different didn't have to mean enemy. "Ready?" Score's thought pulse asked. Jack smiled and gripped the dragon's scales. "Always." They launched into the sky together, surrounded by others who'd once been strangers but were now family. The boy raised by beasts had become something neither species imagined possible. He'd become hope.